Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Annette Feravich. I'm a teacher. Ugh. I tell you, my hairstylist didn't show up today again. None of my crew did today. I don't even know. This is Dr. Annette Feravich. I am here in the classroom. This is the philosophical classroom, and we are talking about a lot of things. We've been talking a lot about groupthink, right? And now kind of ways to, I don't know, sort of get out of the groupthink maybe a little bit, or, I don't know. That was Tuesday we were talking about it. I'm not even sure. But I did come up with a great topic for you today. And we will draw connections in a minute. But before we draw those connections, we are going to go off course just a tiny bit. In my spiritual classroom, I usually do world holidays. World holidays are usually built around religious holidays, usually, which goes to show you that this kind of groupthink has been around for forever, since the beginning of time. But it is Memorial Day, and so we are going to read in the world holidays. We read a lot about these, a lot of different holidays already this month. Let me tell you the holidays we read about. I hope I didn't miss any. Yeah, I did. Pentecost Feast. Feast of Corpus Christi. We need to read that too. I should have read that in the spiritual classroom. But here we are, Memorial Day. All right. Yeah, I need to read that. We need to find out what that is. Maybe we'll read it in the spiritual classroom on Tuesday. Memorial Day is, it's not like there's a law. We can't read it in June. Memorial Day is observed on the last Monday in May in the United States and in every country where American soldiers are buried. I didn't know that. That I did not know. And in every country where American soldiers are buried. Seems like maybe that'd be a lot of countries. It is uncertain exactly when and where the tradition of Memorial Day began. Probably with advertisers wanting to sell Memorial Day sale couches. One theory involves a story of Boalsburg, Pennsylvania, where in 1864 the wives and mothers of soldiers killed in the Civil War decorated the graves of their loved ones. Some say that was the first Memorial Day. Waterloo, New York, is thought to have had the first official holiday in 1866. The celebration was called Decoration Day and included a veterans parade, patriotic speeches, and flags flown at half-staff in memory of soldiers who were killed. By 1869, the custom had become a yearly tradition. The name was changed to Memorial Day in 1882. Today, the holiday commemorates all servicemen and women who have died fighting for the United States. Across the country, flags fly at half-staff. There are parades and speeches. Businesses are closed and gifts are presented to patriotic organizations. During World War I, poppies became symbols of the lives lost in battle. In the spring, red poppies bloomed on the European battlefields where so many Americans died. Veterans organizations sell poppies to raise money in aid of disabled veterans and in memory of lives lost. Special ceremonies are held in different parts of the country. At Gettysburg National Military Park in Pennsylvania, a ceremony marks one of the greatest battles of the Civil War. President Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address is often recited. In Arlington National Cemetery, officials place a wreath on the tomb of the unknowns. The unknowns would be the unknown soldiers. who died without a name, and nobody knew who they were, and they died in battle, and they couldn't figure out who they were. They didn't know. This monument is the final resting place of unidentified soldiers who were killed in past American wars. In seaside communities, tiny boats filled with flowers are sent afloat in honor of people killed at sea. That is really kind of cool. That'd be cool to see, right? Tiny boats filled with flowers setting just afloat. Okay, all right. So I wanted to get that in since I didn't get it in my spiritual classroom, and we're going to talk a little bit about the Pentecost and what do they say? I don't know if those are the same days or not. It doesn't sound like it actually is, does it? Feast of Corpus Christi. I know that's a Catholic holiday. Oh, there's also the Feast of Joan of Arc, which is on Pentecost. So we have let me see something. Well, they don't have those on here. Maybe they do. Maybe I missed it. No, they don't have Feast of Corpus Christi, so it doesn't really matter. Or maybe they do. Hold on. No. All right, let's get to it, shall we? All right. Thanks for listening to that, though. I needed to get that. I wanted to do that for Memorial Day. So, not the best Memorial Day little tribute to a tribute day, but I don't know, maybe I'll do something on Monday. We'll see. I was really excited about today's topic. I am talking about adaptive defense mechanisms. It's my favorite, and I'm like, what is it called again? Adaptive defense mechanisms. So we've talked a lot about following the group and how easy it is to follow the group. We were also talking about it in our spiritual classroom a lot today. And we didn't use the word group, but what we did was, who was your leader in our spiritual classroom? Who is your leader? Many people are bothered and aggravated by the fact that there is something outside of our physical world that we're supposed to be honoring when we don't know anything about it. So what do? We give up our rights and we say, just give me the laws. I just want to know the rules, the basics, so I don't have to understand this bigger picture. So that's what we were talking about in our spiritual classroom, which really is related to what is going on politically. The powers that be, which are the money, where the money is, not necessarily the political powers, Democrat or Republican, but where the money is, really, in my mind, wants to create a bunch of group thinkers, right? And going along in line with science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and really this kind of communistic view. And it does seem, I'm sorry, I'm going to say it nice and loud and clear. Our former president had relationships with high communist officials, and everything that he said and stood for is right out of a communist book. And so I don't know. I'm for our rights, our democratic rights to vote and have our votes count. I talk about in our Bookless classroom all about American history and the lives that were really lost to give us that democratic vote. But even in the spiritual classroom, we can see the Israelites are giving over their democracy, basically. They're saying, no, give me a law. That's what I want. I don't want to be in the decisions. I don't want to talk to God. You, Moses, go up to Mount Sinai, and we're going to be down here, and you just let us know what the law is. Well, that's not a democracy, right? That's not a democracy. That's a world where people want some thinkers to think for them and other people to just do, right? Well, Okay, that's fair. Nobody's saying you can't desire other people to think for you. But, you know, given that you're not a thinker, you likely maybe won't think about the fact that giving that over is very dangerous. Giving that right over is very dangerous. I poured myself a cup of coffee, which was so delish, and now I lost it. So just give me a sec, because I just got to go get that cup of coffee. It should be right there. So I went dancing around someplace else with it. Okay, there it is. So much of what I've been saying, has to do with, this physical nature that we have to, be biased, to be, um, have self interest, right? To worry about our own survival, right? There are, these mechanisms in our bodies, and I just feel that the human spirit, however you want to look at that, has got a mechanism that says if you want really great things, you rise above. In every single classroom, we talk about that in one way or another. And as you rise above, let's be clear, what does that mean? That means you take the high road. That means you take care of humanity. That's what that means. So you rise above in this altruistic kind of way, I would say, right? You rise above. So you make the right choice, right? You make the right choice every step of the way. So that's what we've been talking about. Now, we've got this physical nature about us, right? This natural DNA, this natural biology, these natural inclinations that we have to get to the group, to want to get in the group, to want to feel welcome by the group, right? But then to also have these independent thoughts and rise above, but sort of this physical nature to for survival, for belongingness, to be biased about our own thoughts and feelings, to have positive illusions about ourselves and about our progress and about our beliefs and values and all those kinds of things. So we have these natural inclinations to go on autopilot when it comes to thinking things through. And what I've said in the spiritual classroom, the way it would be analogous to here in this philosophical classroom. So going from subconscious, automatic pilot, to conscious. There, in a spiritual classroom, we talk about that's where the moral choice exists, right there, right? With intention and intention for thought. You can't pass over. It might not be a democracy, right? You might, for whatever reason, say, I don't need the democracy, right? I want just give me the law. I'll follow the law. I'll do my job. That's what I want to do. I don't need a vote in this. I don't need a say in it. Just tell me what I'm supposed to do, right? So that doesn't sound like a democracy. You smart people tell me what I'm supposed to do. That doesn't sound like a democracy, right? It's not the creatures that God made. Those aren't the creatures that God made. And so morally and spiritually and even intellectually, what is evolution other than rising above what we used to be, right? So we're motivated to do that, rise above what we're supposed to be. But we see this inclination, these natural inclinations, go with the flow, don't make waves, go along with the group, right? I feel like I belong. I need this love and belongingness, and we're made that way. There is no changing our positivity bias. Why would somebody walk in and change our positivity bias? It's kind of the same way that I feel about our all the sexual confusion. You're throwing a monkey wrench in there. Why? Right? So, okay. So, all right. So, we have these biases. We have these natural tendencies, right, that go along with our bodies. And again, it's not a bad thing. These drive us to belong. We are driven creatures that are driven to love, to belong. And again, I started to change. Say, you can't change those positive biases that we have. It is about survival. You might say, well, intellectually speaking, we need to give everything a balanced approach. So let's change human nature so human nature doesn't have what's called a positivity bias. It's literally, so you could look it up. You could just, digital positivity bias. And I did in one of these classes give you a whole list of, like, we think our friends are smarter than the rest of everybody's friends. We think of, ourselves as in the top. So 97% think that they're in the top, 10% of their class, whatever, or 25% smartest, all those things. We all have this. It makes sense. It makes physical sense. Why? Because that's our motivation. That's our motivation. A positive outlook on life motivates the creature, the living creature, to go on living. Now, some intellectual could come in here and say, guess what? It's not for you. Really, for us, we shouldn't be thinking about have this positivity bias. If we were to rise above and evolve, we would not have this positivity bias and then go wipe out the planet. Right? Well, there is a human nature, and to ignore this or to think that it is normal to go against human nature. Think about that. So it's normal to go against our positivity bias. No, it's not. No, it's not. It's not. And I promise you, people are playing games with all kinds of DNA for all kinds of purposes in order to, I believe, get people just to follow the law, to be robots. And robots work independently. So COVID and the isolation, was all part of the master plan. What did she say? Did she just say what I think she said? What did she just say? Okay. But let's get to the interesting stuff that is truly my area of expertise. I have a few studies that I just attached myself to very early in my psychology career. So as an undergraduate, I attached myself to some studies. Everybody loved Milgram's study, of course, right? But there were a few studies like Seligman's studies on learned helplessness that I talk about in the critical classroom was a real big one for me, a very big one. And in particular, he tied it with self-esteem issues, and I was off and running. There's another one, another study out there. I won't get their names. Yes, I will. Fagan? That's one of the names out there. That's out there. Did a study on prejudice and self-esteem. Just like an amazing study. So there are a few studies that, there's another study that was done by Calhoun on mice and overpopulation. Woo! What a study. Calhoun, John C. Calhoun did a study with mice on overpopulation. Look it up and look at the pictures. But read the details of it. Don't read just a brief overview. Read the details of what overpopulation does to people. Holy shit. Unbelievable. Okay, all right. So some studies early on that just attached me right to psychology. And one of those studies, not very early on, but after I started getting into positive psychology, it was one of the first studies in positive psychology that really drew me. And I'll tell you why. It was because, let me show you this. I just give me 1 second. I want to show you something. I just want you to know that when you're a book person, after years and years of having shelves and shelves of books, you can go right to your shelf and find a book. And that's a skill I just can't get over that I love so much. I can find my books. I have hundreds of books. And I just bought over 100 books. And I can find my books. I can find them. And here we go. So this is... So you can combine the things I've talked about in 3 of my classrooms, critical thinking classroom, spiritual classroom, and this classroom, to kind of put some of our thoughts together. In critical thinking classroom, we talked about learned helplessness and how learned helplessness can lead to depression. This is more towards a high school group. Critical thinking is more towards a high school group where they're really trying to find themselves, right? And figure out who they are. So this is really good. Self-esteem issues and those kinds of things. Well, I'd followed Martin Seligman for a while, and as I was going into graduate school, this issue came out, and my mentor, a mentor of mine, gave me this issue, and it's the 2000 issue of American Psychologist, special issue on happiness, excellence, and optimal human functioning. And so Seligman is laying out his plan to start a discipline in psychology, which is positive psychology. So this is where it began. It began right here, right here. Seligman knows how to begin something. He begins it by writing and then speaking it so everyone hears it. It makes sense. He gets a solid theory in his head, and then he says, this is what we're doing in psychology, because he's a big enough name to be able to do that. So this is the special issue here. You can see January of 2000. Can you see that? There you go. So January 2000 is the special issue. The whole issue of this psychological magazine is dedicated to Seligman's new discipline that he announces here, which is positive psychology. So there it is, special issue, positive psychology. When did it begin in psychology? It began January 2000 with this issue. I know, drum roll, please. Can we have some trumpets? Can we have some confetti? I think not. Okay, so he gives the introduction of positive psychology there. Martin E.P. Seligman is there. David Buss, who has got theories there on the evolution of happiness. He is a great name in psychology relative to evolutionary theory, if you're into that theory. And I was at that time for sure. Ed Diener, subjective well-being. Ed Diener is the person, he wrote the happiness scale, so satisfaction with life scale, which we talked about in our critical thinking classroom. He wrote that scale that we've been using. Christopher Peterson, all the talk that we've talked about in optimism in our critical thinking classroom, that and explanatory style. Are you an optimist or a pessimist? Via measurement, do you know? Like with using a measurement, and then in that measurement can tell you what to work on. We're going to talk about a little bit about that today too. So he passed away at age 60. David G. Myers has written textbook after textbook on social psychology, as well as books on happiness. Ryan and Dici, so we've got is the self-determination theory, whatever. I mean, I'm saying whatever in the way that I can go on and go on and on and on. But right now, right here, this is the theory that we're talking about right here by George E. Vaillant. And it's called adaptive mental mechanisms or adaptive defense mechanisms. I use the word defense because there's a trigger in your memory with defense mechanisms. Most people have heard of the concept of defense mechanisms. And these adaptive mental mechanisms are, they piggyback on the defense mechanisms that you know well, which are from Freudian theory. So if you know anything about it or have even heard of it, these are the mechanisms we're talking about, but just with a slight turn. Whereas Freud's defense mechanisms are focus on the negative outcomes. We have these. It's like, is it our nature to be good? So were we born good and taught to be bad, or were we born bad and taught to be good? Freud comes from the perspective of we were born bad and we were taught to be good. Vaillant and others say that we have adaptive mechanisms that make us good. We were born to be good, and sometimes we're taught to be bad. That's what Vaillant said. Also another important thing for this class, and even though that we're getting less philosophical and a little bit more scientific here, he's an MD. So if you know anything about me, I'm not impressed by MDs, not one single bit. I don't think that they're free thinkers at all. I don't think that I could stop. In fact, that almost sums it up. I do not think that medical doctors are free thinkers at all. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't some, but they're so few and far between, and apparently the medical community has shut them up real good now. So yeah, I don't see any free thinkers in the medical community. There are, because people spoke out against COVID and stuff like that, but they still do it with their stupid tails between their legs, don't they? They do. You know it. All these people in their glass houses afraid that somebody's going to throw a stone. So they shut their mouths. Okay, so I just love this. I got 2 of these copies. I have 2 of them. So there's his article. This is a journal article. So this is like a technical article for psychologists. So when they write their articles here, it's not like it's in Psychology Today, right? It's articles for the people in the field, right? So there's George Vaillant right there. And lots and lots of data that he collected. So let's talk about this. I said it's related to Freud's defense mechanisms, which were, I mean, look at this. Data. Makes the hair stand up on my arms. Oh my gosh. I'm just thinking because I haven't had it removed. Let's talk about George Vaillant and what he's got going here. Okay, so all right, let me I'm gonna quick go through here. You know what, I've got the wrong name of the slides up here, so the wrong date on the slides and the wrong name. I didn't pull up the right slides up here for the name, but I pulled up this group of slides to kind of revisit some of the things that we have been talking about. All right, so all of this has to do with the group. We haven't seen the pictures in a long time because I haven't updated that. I've been talking at you and not really referencing any of the pictures. So the last one we had there was sort of this research on the self-fulfilling prophecy. We also talked about the fundamental attribution error, and some of these things really highlight these automatic processes that we have for thinking, right? So self-fulfilling prophecy, if you tell me that this group of people is going to do this, I'm not assuming that you're going to lie, right? So I'm pretty sure they're going to do it. And and even if they aren't, what happens? It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. They really do end up becoming better students. They were average students. Why? Well, there's a reason for it, and they looked into it. Teachers calling on them more, teachers asking for those students to elaborate more, challenging them more in every single way. So we see that there are these natural tendencies. It's not that every teacher did that, but we have a number of teachers who did. And so we get to see human nature is what we get to see. What is a natural tendency for people to do? It's a natural tendency for people to inspire the prophecy, whatever the prophecy is. It's natural for individuals to inspire that prophecy. If the prophecy is bad luck because of a black cat, then guess what's going to happen, right? If the prophecy is good luck, I'm going to get a raise today, who knows? But, it's really not a put it out there and it'll happen. That seems pretty elementary. Most people do try and put it out there and it doesn't happen. Most people do go say their prayers. I need a check to make up next month. People put it out there. Not hearing everyone, all of a sudden there's a little magical check fairy that brought it down, right? So it's really not, self-fulfilling prophecies is not putting it out there. It really is a belief. It's a belief that you can't control. So what we're talking about here are factors that seem to be hardwired in the human system, right? And as we talk about those things, what else is hardwired are these defense mechanisms. Now, again, when Freud introduced these and his daughter expanded on them, so Anna Freud expanded on them and actually gave them life, the defense mechanisms life. And I have to tell you that later on, it was much later, because these theories came out in the 1930s, 40s, 50s. These theories came out. It wasn't until the 1990s where they really started doing research, real scientific method, using scientific methodology research on the defense mechanisms. Why did it take so long? Because nobody cared about Freud. They were doing their own thing. They're like, Freud's not a scientist. We don't like Freud. We don't like what he had to say, so we're not paying any attention. And lo and behold, attachment theory. So we've demonstrated this very ephemeral concept, this tangible concept of attachment. We've demonstrated it in research. So much so that we have got consistency in attachment style from childhood to adulthood to the rate of something like 60%. All right, Freud. Here's a nail on the head. Thank you for the hammer, right? No, honest to gosh, he was so, and so why aren't we studying these things? Well, they didn't feel that Freud was scientific, and so they weren't studying them. And this is a whole university trend that goes to science, technology, engineering, mathematics, right? Instead of philosophy about it, instead of theory about it, instead of this open-minded kind of fresh way of thinking about it, which also may include powers well beyond just our animalistic BS. That's what I live for, animal tendencies. Who thought of that? It's not who thought of it, because we know who thought of it, right? Darwin. And you know what? He was messed up and very depressed, right? And a neurotic, but that's okay. Neurotics have lots of great ideas. They give us great art. They give us great music. So that's not to say, but all I'm saying is maybe he wasn't the most rational thinker. That's all I'm saying, right? He wasn't, and then what? So that's not so bad. Okay, great thought, open-minded, fresh, creative. But the fact that you got on the bandwagon and have made it like you are the intellectual elite is the most ridiculous thing. So what you're saying is our only aspiration is to be an animal. We fulfilled ourselves when we fulfilled our animalistic tendencies, because that's really where it's going. Where else would it go? Unless there's something higher than that, that's all we got. I don't even know how we can think beyond what we're made to think. How could we even think about goals? I don't even know. Theory doesn't make any sense to me. I'll say it. I said it. I don't care. University. I have my PhD. You and your effing theories that are just nuts. It takes just the same amount of faith and balls to believe a theory that we've never seen ever physically come true. Never. Oh, a beak changed? Oh, really? Because it changed right back. And big deal. Our skin color changes. We all know that. We're talking species to species. Where is it? Oh, it takes millions of years. Really? Because I don't think we could have evolved to this. Whatevs. Bunch of things you can't explain, but then you're like, virgin birth? I don't even know what you're talking about. Really? Because we have virgin births right now. We could. Can artificially inseminate somebody. That'd be a virgin birth. Not, what? 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 If it could be done today, why couldn't it be done a million years ago? Or whatever. Not a million years ago. Why couldn't it be done, 2023 years ago by a God who happens to be the God? It just seems like not impossible. Apparently not. Let's go on. Oh, I kept that in the background there. That's okay. It kind of looks okay. So what I'm saying is there's a relationship between positive or highly adaptive mental mechanisms or defense mechanisms and poorly adaptive. Freud focused on poorly adaptive defense mechanisms, while George Vaillant focused on highly adaptive ones. George Vaillant came much later on in the picture. So Freud had, a good 50 years of roots in his maladaptive theories. I'm not calling his theories maladaptive. I'm calling the subject of his theories. He looked on mental illness. He studied mental illness. This in positive psychology is not about mental illness. It is about those skills and talents that make us better people. So while Freud focused on what comes naturally to us when we're in a corner, when we're in fight or flight mode, that's what but Freud is thinking we're in fight or flight mode all the time as a youngster. That's really what he was thinking. And which makes you think Freud was in fight or flight mode all the time as a child. And that's the speculation, right? And it's a speculation about an inappropriate relationship between him and his mother, which is so interesting because it gives you a foundation for his psychosexual stages. And it also gives you a foundation for the controversy over blaming the child in his theories, right? And a controversy that came that he questioned himself, and then was silenced by the psychological community. At the same time that they were also doing the Kinsey studies, looking at the sexual arousal of infant children. Kinsey report, there's one for the female and there's one for the male. Kinsey report. You can find it free. You can get it free in openlibrary.org. I think it is. I think that's what it is. Open Library. So it's free online. You check it out. When you check it out, you have to bring it back in an hour, whatever. It doesn't matter. You can renew it, especially if nobody else wants it, right? Which I like. They used to let you check it out for 2 weeks and then I'd let it sit there and nobody else could check it out. Now it's an hour. Awesome. You want it? You can take it, but read it now. So, okay. So, Freud focused on poorly adaptive. Why? Because psychology was focused on mental illness in the beginning, right? And for all kinds of reasons. We're not here to talk about the history of psychology. But here, Carol Merrill will show you how. There we go. But these are highly adaptive, right? So highly adaptive mechanisms, both of them are automatic. Now, this is key because how am I talking about this? And it seems like it's very different than groupthink or whatever I was saying before. Who even knows? I don't know. But it's not different because what we're talking about is what's written in our DNA. But remember, I'm an environmentalist in every sense of the word. But psychologically speaking, what that means is I believe that the environment is the motivation for the majority of our behavior, and very little of it has to do with our DNA. I have to believe that, otherwise no changes involved. And why do we even have my profession then? We have my profession because I'm one of the dinosaurs who are left teaching positive psychology and living it as well. And I'd like my paycheck now, Seligman. I would like my paycheck, Oakland University, for being a lifelong demonstration of your theory. I'd like my paycheck. And if you think I'm kidding, I'm not. I know you're studying me. I know you are. And I want my paycheck. I demonstrated it in every way to you. In every way to you, this works. Watch me. Watch me, students. Watch me. Do you want to know why I'm telling you to watch me? I'm telling you to watch me because the universities know that what they've been teaching in positive psychology is true, and they know it's true because I am their proof. I am the demonstration that despite being surrounded by all kinds of stress, watch my mystery series, despite being surrounded by all kinds of stress, I can sit here with the stability and intellect and spirit and stability as emotional stability to still talk to you despite all of these pressures, despite the fact that I'm literally claiming in my mysteries that universities are studying me and I want my paycheck. I want my paycheck because I know that you are. And I know that I am the demonstration against all these universities who are teaching people to be like robots, to teach them to have no spirit, to teach these university students to be atheists, to have no belief system, to act that it's okay to believe that your only aspiration is to be an animal. And I am the university elite and intellect that has not only shouted that that's not true for you, Martin Seligman, for you, Christopher Peterson, for the entire discipline of positive psychology. Not only have I shouted it, I have been the living example of it. How could I possibly sit here and laugh authentically? How could I possibly sit here and talk about a God with all these pressures around me, with the faith that is my greatest spiritual gift? How can I do that? How can I do that? You write me a check. You write me, and I wanted to have a lot of zeros. I wanted to have a lot of zeros. And don't you worry, I'm not a self-interested person. Don't you worry, I will give it back. I will give it back, and I will give it back because I'm the person who got the gift and made it 10 times what it was. Not 5 times or 2 times. I'm the person who made it 10 times. Not to be a braggart, but to those who are given much, much is expected. And I know that. So I will return. So you don't worry about giving me that check with all those zeros on. You don't worry about it. I will return. How much will I return? Tenfold. Tenfold. Not 5, not 2. Tenfold. Alrighty. You heard it, folks. You heard it. You know why? Because I'm fighting for the right thing and I don't sit on my ass. That's why. Okay. Oh, no. What time are we done? Yeah, 3 o'clock. I always do that because we have Wednesday class right before. And then I'm like, how did I not get anything done? No, you did. You still have time to get the rest of it done because that's what you do. You talk and you do the build up, Dr. Feravich. We know how you run. We know how you operate. We know how you roll. You give us a build up for a good 20 minutes, Dr. Feravich. You give us a build up. But then you produce. You produce, Dr. Feravich. You really do. So we're going to return to this in just a minute. All right. I want to really solidify because the overall theme right now is not the great big theme about humanity and destroying it every hour of every day. Not that one. Right now, it's the second theme about how we can see that we destroy humanity every hour of every day, not because these are written in our DNA, but because we have learned this based on a whole bunch of things, right? Based on a whole bunch of things. So I want to stick with that thought pattern and that argument, which is, once again, looking at DNA relative to looking at what our environment provides. Now, shocker or spoiler alert or whatever you want to say here, Valent is an MD and all about the physical DNA. I'm not saying he looked at the DNA, no, but what he's about, the word mechanism here, when he uses the word mechanism, that literally is like a machine. So if we have a machine, we've got written code for that machine, don't we? What's the written code? DNA. What is Valent here? Shocker, spoiler alert. Where does Valent put his marbles? Or does he put his coin? He puts it in the DNA, in the mechanisms. Now, I'm not saying Valent very clearly, because the studies show it's an environment, but crazy what he found out. Let's look a little closer. Instead of just honoring the man, Let's look a little closer, shall we? Okay, so here is a definition of adapt. And so I wanted to draw you in with your understanding or what you might already, your previous knowledge of Freud. So defense mechanisms, all right? Any previous knowledge you might have. If you don't, no biggie. I just wanted to draw you in that way. Okay? All right, so, but now what I want to do is I want to give you the definition. So a little bit more of a background over here. So adaptive defense mechanisms, what are they? They're also called adaptive mental mechanisms as well. And I think there's a third name, but I think I'm forgetting it right now. Yeah, I am. Okay, so adaptive mental mechanisms. So there is the definition there. Involuntary, healthy coping mechanisms. So what's the difference there then between Freud's mental mechanisms and Valence mental mechanisms is that Freud's are poorly adaptive and Valence are highly adaptive, but they are both involuntary coping mechanisms. Valence are healthy. Freud's are not, but and I think you got that. I think I've said that enough, but they are both involuntary. Freud likely focuses on the poor or unhealthy coping mechanisms. Freud likely focuses on the unhealthy coping mechanisms. Why? Because he's working with people with mental illness. So that's where his vision is. That's the framing that he has. He's always thinking about the negative, right? But so they are involuntary coping mechanisms. Freud identified the unhealthy ones. Valence identified the healthy ones. Now, in positive psychology, the concept or the idea is we focus on the healthy ones. That's what we focus on. So psychology has always been, to their detriment, focused on the unhealthy. And how do we make the unhealthy work for us? That's literally what this communist society is doing. Getting the unhealthy to work for us. Why not get the healthy to work for us? Well, because they might start thinking and making decisions and all those kind of things, right? Communist society. Who was buddying up to the communists? That's what you look at. That's what you look at, right? And I saw a documentary on it yesterday, and the idea is to normalize it. We just buddy up to communists, and we have normalized Putin, haven't we? So much so that people are choosing communist ethics over Ukrainian ethics. That's literally what you're doing. You're choosing communist ethics over Ukrainian ethics. Just is. You say, one is more ethical, I'll go along with that person. Right? Unless you're admitting that you're just going along for money and the benefit of money, right? We go along with what is right. That's what we say as a country. That's what we say as a people. We go along with what is right. So you're saying communist ethics are better than Ukrainian ethics. Okay. I don't say that. Watch the bouncing ball. Guess what's going to happen? It's going to bounce. It's going to move. Might move in your direction, and you might not like it. And what I mean by that actually is it might move towards a candidate that you like, that bouncing ball, and you might not like it. And what are you going to do about it? Okay, so now let's look at the broad classes. So there to the left, we have the definition. Adaptive defense mechanisms are involuntary, healthy coping mechanisms. But they're automatic. They're written in our DNA. When bad events happen to us, we use Freud's defense mechanisms. When good things happen to us, right, or even bad things happen to us, we can rely on healthy coping mechanisms. They're automatic, but we can also we can refine some good automatic skills, right? We might automatically be hungry and find food. That's an automatic behavior. But we can refine that behavior, right? We can refine it so that we aren't eating at certain times, right? So that we're not eating before bed, so that we're eating fruits and vegetables. We can refine that behavior. It's an automatic behavior. Doesn't mean we can't refine it. Same thing here. We're talking about automatic behaviors. Doesn't mean we can't refine them. Now let's take a look at those 3 broad classes of automatic behaviors right there. So we've got, it says broad classes there, and those are 3 broad classes of automatic, healthy coping mental mechanisms. What are some automatic coping mechanisms that we use on a regular basis? Well, number 1 is social support seeking. Nobody told you that when you feel bad, a really good idea is to find some social support. Now, somebody may have said that to you, but that's not how you learned it. You didn't learn it as a child like, oh, go to your mom for social support. It'll make you feel better. And then the next time the infant's in the room going, I don't even know what to do when I feel bad. And somebody goes, go to your mom to make you feel better. Oh yeah, okay. No, we didn't have to learn it. An automatic mechanism means we didn't have to learn to do it. And we didn't have to learn to seek out social support. Do you understand now more and more what we're talking about? Very subtle behaviors, right? Not so much, we're studying behaviors that aren't so evident, right? That aren't physically out there, that you could see and touch and feel. Those are the behaviors that we're studying, right? So are you beginning to see now how some of these behaviors can be learned, right? But some of these behaviors, as Valent is saying, is really part of our DNA and all of humanity's DNA. As a people, and we've studied this in many ways, right? Susan Fisk says our number 1 need is belongingness. We talked about that in our spiritual classroom and our critical thinking classroom. So that is what? Written in our DNA. Valent is just saying exactly the same thing. Valent is just saying, what are these automatic mechanisms that are highly adaptive, that are healthy for us, that make us healthier? Well, one of them is seeking social support. Nobody had to teach you that. You didn't have to go to school to learn how to seek social support. Some of us are better at it than others. But since a child, we did that. We did. And if our mothers weren't, if we had a poor attachment with our mothers and we couldn't go to our mothers, it didn't mean that we didn't have the inclination to go to somebody for social support, right? So automatic mental mechanism, an automatic behavior that we engage in, that's a healthy coping mechanism. Number 2, conscious cognitive strategies. So once again, picture yourself with the problem as a young child. Are you standing there without a clue what to do? So a child who sees a bottle on the blanket but is not able to walk or can't even crawl over to the bottle that well, will take that blanket and pull that blanket towards the child to get the bottle closer to the child. All right. So here we see a mechanism of coping, of problem solving. Nobody taught that child. How could you teach an infant? All right, Tommy, it's on a blanket. See, it's on a blanket. See, your bottle's on a blanket. And watch what happens when mama pulls the blanket. The bottle gets closer. Now you put your hand on the blanket, Tommy, and pull that blanket. And look at your bottle. Look. Oh, no, Tommy, no. Pull the blanket closer to you. How does that infant even understand the words? It doesn't. So we know this is an automatic mechanism that children can do. They can learn how to problem solve. What is Valent saying is the cognitive conscious thinking. What do? Do you stand in the middle of a room when you have a problem? No. You begin the mental mechanisms that help you work out the problem, right? Something gets stuck on your lawnmower, and what do? You begin to look at it with your eyes, feel around with your hands, right? So even the simplest problems, you begin to consciously think about, right? You consciously think about means you bring them to mind. You bring the problem to mind and you purposefully look for a solution. Did somebody teach you to do that? Did somebody teach you to problem solve like that? Did anyone teach you to problem solve? Anyone say, all right, class, problem solving class. All right, so when the bottle's out of your reach, but it's on a blanket, lucky you. If it's not on a blanket, SOL. I don't know. All right, and then the third thing there is the involuntary mental mechanisms. And so those are the mental mechanisms that Valent is highlighting here. All right, so on the left, I have listed a few of these poorly adaptive defense mechanisms that Freud pointed out. So delusional projection, psychotic denial, psychotic distortion. Do you see things the way they actually are, right, and admit them, right? Or are you going into this kind of mental defensive, it calls it dysregulation or dysfunction? At the action level, so those were those sort of feeling levels, right? This automatic kind of feeling and then mental game you play. Action levels, Freud called passive aggressive, right? Or acting out. Little children act out, but sometimes so do adults. So that's a physical. So all they are is categorizing. You're probably familiar with some of these, like being passive aggressive. You're probably familiar with denial, right? With people who are in denial. Maybe you're familiar with projection. There, a disavowal or image distortion level, projection, right? I don't like an undesirable quality in me, so I project it onto you. Or going into fantasy land. We see that right now as a defense mechanism with individuals who can't get enough of Disney, right? Or that's their favorite place and they go to Disney year after year. That's a defense mechanism, and the defense mechanism is healthy. The defense mechanism is fantasy, and it is unhealthy. It's unhealthy. You live your life in a fantasy land with all of these, what are the comics? Marvel comic strip characters, or what's the other one? I don't even know. That's a life of fantasy. And I realize that we're being pushed into a life of fantasy because real life is so, hell on wheels, but it's still not healthy to live a life of fantasy. And then compromise formation level. These are just, again, categories. I don't even know what they mean exactly. So dissociation. So that is where we can't remember stuff, right? Or we completely have a disassociation between what has happened, right? And we can't explain how that happened, right? What is taking place now and what has taken place in the past. We have no idea. Displacement. So this is kick the dog, right? So we kick the dog instead of solving our problem. Isolation. So this, we can isolate ourselves, especially when we feel guilt and shame. It makes us unhealthy. And if we put people purposefully in isolation, we can keep people from being healthy. Repression. Repression is going back to an earlier age. And then reaction formation. And look it up. Because right now, we're past time, number one. And number two, I wouldn't be able to give you an explanation that was worthy of like a lot more thought that I have to put into it. I have to go look at my examples and things like that. I don't have that. There are highly adaptive mechanisms, mental mechanisms, anticipation, altruism, humor, sublimation, and suppression. We have 15 minutes. I have 15 minutes, not even 15 minutes. I have got 12 minutes to get to our reading room, which is enough time, but it gives me a break. So I'm going to, and that's because that's all I have is that. So I'm going to call it a day, and I'll Philosophical Classroom. I am Dr. Annette Feravich. I am the teacher. Thanks for joining me in the classroom. Don't forget, we are here Tuesday again, so have a great Memorial weekend. Get out in the sunshine. Make sure that you are getting your vitamin D. And I'll be back here in, if I forgot anything for your Memorial good wishes, I'll be back here in 12 minutes with our reading room. I have a new story if you didn't see it. Our new story is Mark Twain, The £1,000,000 Note, right? So like the £1,000,000, right? Because this is English money. Is that what they call it? English currency? I guess so. So pounds. So the £1,000,000 banknote is what it's called. I remember reading it when I got the books in my English lit class. And I remember liking it, but I don't remember anything about the story. But I do remember liking it. All right. And I do remember really liking Mark Twain after I read his short stories a lot. So come back in now 11 minutes. See you soon. Thanks.